Hey everybody, this is TJR, and if this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. If not, welcome back. A few days ago, Rick Beato posted a video where he discussed a two-part theory regarding music and creativity. In part one, he discussed how certain aspects of creativity can begin to fade, starting at around age 30 or so. Now, during the first part, he brings up numerous examples of artists who reached creative peaks during their 20s and how their creativity saw at least some diminishment after the age of 30. Now, he never states that these artists didn't continue to write and record good songs after 30. He just states that the level of creativity from their earlier years isn't matched. And before I discuss part two of his theory, I want to comment and say that I think he has a point. Elton John has readily admitted in interviews that he had this golden period during his early adulthood, which was the 70s, where he could seem to do no wrong. This would have been starting with his second self-titled album, all the way to his 11th studio album titled Blue Moves from 1976, which in interviews he referred to as the last really good album he made prior to releasing Songs from the West Coast somewhere around the year 2000. Now, Elton would have been around roughly 23 upon the release of his self-titled second album and roughly around 29 years old upon the release of Blue Moves. And I have to admit, there are lots of bands and music artists who are legendary in part because they have written and recorded both amazing songs and amazing albums, but who arguably also had no real clunkers in their album catalog. Bands like the Beatles, the Police, and Led Zeppelin all had amazing runs where most fans and critics will agree that there are no clunkers or stinkers within their discography of studio albums. And one thing these artists, like the ones I've just named, have in common is that their discography of studio albums is somewhere in the range of 10 years or less, and were written, recorded, and released while the band members were mostly still in the early part of their adulthood. Jimmy Page was 30, and Robert Plant was 31, approximately, when they released their last album, In Through the Outdoor, in 1979. Sting was 32 when the Police released their last album, Synchronicity, in 1983. But Andy Summers was 41, an exception to the rule there. The Beatles, whom Rick Beato brings up in his video, all hovered between late 20s and their early 30s at the time of their breakup. Now compare this to catalogs by huge legendary artists that have had much longer careers, like, say, the Rolling Stones or Elton John. I think that most fans and critics will agree that while we still love these artists, the later part of their careers have had some smattering, at least, of albums that were considered clunkers, along with albums that were considered to be a return to greatness. He also makes note of the fact that most great scientific breakthroughs came from scientists in the early part of their adulthood. And he names numerous examples like Einstein, Newton, and Edison. Now, he attributes this to the concept of fluid intelligence, a concept that was first introduced in 1943 by the psychologist Raymond Cattell. And this is characterized by the ability to solve new problems independently of previously acquired knowledge. Now, while each individual may vary, fluid intelligence peaks in early adulthood and then tends to decline with age. Honestly, I had never heard of this theory before Rick Beato's video. But again, I think he's onto something. Prior to all of this, I had made similar observations over the years and always attributed it to a certain level of optimism that comes with youth, an optimism that tells you you can accomplish almost anything, and that makes you want to break previous barriers and rules and preconceived notions such as what defines a pop song. Now, then he gets to part 2, where he counters part 1 by giving examples of music artists who have created great music in the later part of their musical careers. And he attributes this to crystallized intelligence, also introduced alongside fluid intelligence by psychologist Raymond Cattell. Crystallized intelligence is defined as the accumulation of knowledge, facts, and skills acquired throughout life. Crystallized intelligence is further defined by the following characteristics: information from memory, influenced by education and culture, and it also improves with age as more knowledge has been gained. He then uses this to illustrate why some of the most famous classical composers created some of their best work during the latter half of their lives and their careers. Now, I agree with this too, but I think there is another aspect to this debate and argument regarding age and creativity that should also be mentioned. I oftentimes have to think it must create a certain level of inner struggle after you've created a great pinnacle piece of work in your career, where you have to ask yourself, okay, what next? Case in point, I remember reading Bono of U2 struggling with this when discussing any follow-up to the Joshua Tree. Both himself and the band certainly didn't want to just deliver the same album again. But in truthfulness, I think that that is what most music fans and critics really wanted, even if they can't acknowledge it to themselves. In my own experience, I have oftentimes noticed that when it comes to music, we are kind of like children who want to hear our favorite bedtime story again and again. And after an artist delivers a masterpiece like the Joshua Tree, we want a repeat. We might intellectually agree that we want the artist to grow and follow their muse, but I think that emotionally and subconsciously, what we really want is the same experience over again. I've always thought that Hollywood understands this desire more so than the music industry and music artists, and this is why so many movie sequels are just that, a repeat of the same experience with a few changes here and there so that you don't quite realize it the first time you watch. And I think this struggle is felt and has been felt by many of our favorite classic rock artists. You look back on your pinnacle and think, what do I do now? Is there anything else to say? Is there anything else to prove? Honestly, I think it can become easy to be haunted by your past successes, and that this can sometimes make an artist start to second guess themselves and could even endanger future successes. Anyways, these are some of my thoughts on this topic. Let me know yours. Please leave a comment. Oh, and one final note. A few days after releasing his video, he had to release a follow-up video critiquing the fact that so many viewers began to respond and critique the first part of his theory, and that is, of course, that musical creativity is at its strongest under the age of 30, before they listened to the second part of his theory, and as a result ended up embarrassing themselves by citing some of the same examples he used in the second half of his video, before watching the second half, of course, where he discussed exactly that many musicians are able to defy this with crystallized intelligence. I left him a comment and stated that leaping before you look is basically what the internet is famous for. Word to the wise, you should always finish a video first before making a comment, especially when that video is making a very nuanced argument. It will probably save you from a lot of embarrassment. As always, if you like these videos, be sure to hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. A big shout out and thank you to my Patreon supporters. Patreon supporters do receive exclusive weekly videos not available on this channel. If you'd like to be a Patreon supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.